Welcome to Gen Z Journey. Today we have Seven with us. Seven is born in Los Angeles, United States in the year 1999. He's a serial entrepreneur with multiple failures and successes. And right now he's a speaker, host, and educator who aims to inspire connection, focus, and energy in leader. And recently he started his own podcast called Lost and Searching, and he's the host on it. So Seven, you have a very interesting background, and I hope I did not miss out on anything.
No, you actually gave too much detail. I don't usually reveal my age when I was born because most people don't realize it, and these things are really important tools, which we can maybe talk about later. But look, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate
Mhm.
it. You didn't tell me you'd have such epic music playing in the background when we started. That was cool, man. That was great. I'm ready for more of that. Good to chat to you, man. I'm excited.
Thank you. I believe that actually energizes people and all that, help them
There
get
you
into
go. You're
mood and
right.
all
You're
that.
right. It does. Music, they say, is the oldest form of magic. And that's why it speaks the vibration of the music seems to speak
Hmm.
directly to our heart, our soul, something, and get us moving and getting us. And so it's definitely working to your advantage. It's energized me, so something's working.
Oh, I'm glad that it's working. But yes, now first, can we learn more about your childhood? Because I believe you have a very interesting childhood coming into who you are today.
Where do you want me to start, Andrew?
Oh,
And
that makes
how
that.
how 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 low do you want me to drop the mood of the conversation? Um, I'm happy to start
Mhm.
pretty much wherever you want me to, with a high level background of what things were like for me in Los Angeles. So, as you mentioned, I was born in Los Angeles, California. I now live in London in the UK. And the reason I came over, unfortunately, was not necessarily the best of circumstances. My childhood, I would describe as tumultuous. When I was 2 years old, my mother got very sick with a brain tumor, and when I was eight, she passed away from a second one, and didn't have very much family. My father was the kind of person I describe as not really meant to be a parent. I think it's the way I
Mhm.
describe it. He wasn't a bad parent. There wasn't any like, abuse or anything traumatic going on. He just wasn't a very responsible person. So the way I describe it is that I kind of half raised myself. Like my family members kept me alive, but I raised myself. And wasn't very good at it because, of course, children and teenagers aren't very good at raising children and teenagers.
Oh,
Most adults aren't very good at it, so let
yes.
alone when you're younger and it's yourself. So that kind of kickstarted a journey of a lot of challenge, and naturally what happens is that challenge leads to a desire for change, for improvement, for your life to radically improve, and for you to change lives of others so that other people don't have to go through the same thing that you did, right? So
Mhm.
um a lot of unprocessed things as a result of that experience. We were very I don't like using the word poor. We were very broke. Experienced things like homelessness, houselessness, rough sleeping as well when I was younger. Couch surfing, which when you're 8 years old, you don't understand. And Gabor Mate describes all children as narcissists because
Mhm.
when something happens to you during those young formative years, you blame it on yourself. You have no conception that it could be anything other than you. So you develop the mindset, the pattern, the mental pattern, the neurological pattern that this is because of me. And I remember I was probably 7 years old the first time I thought things would be so much easier if I wasn't here anymore.
Mhm.
And now, what a thing for a child to think, right? It's heartbreaking enough when we hear teenagers and adults saying that, but imagine you heard a 7 or 8 year old saying that. You wouldn't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do. My father didn't know what to do. No one knew what to do. It was a challenging time. Um, got the opportunity to move here to London to sort of rebuild our lives because my father had some family here, so some of his family was here. And LA when you're broke and in the situation we were in was no place for a child to be raised. We didn't really have a future over there. So moved over here and things became physically more comfortable. The challenge was that I got left alone a lot. And it's a good thing and a bad thing because I was left alone with all this unprocessed childhood trauma. So, as a teenager, experiencing depression, suicidal ideation, social anxiety, very, very intense social anxiety, very intense loneliness. I'm an only child with the kind of family situation I've described, and not a very empathetic, not a very understanding family. Not a family that's particularly emotionally versed. So they couldn't soothe, I couldn't self-soothe except to dissociate. And so that began a number of most of my teenage years a pattern of dissociation through video games and through daydreaming. Now, ironically, as an adult, I'm a storyteller. So what that means is it's actually been ironically useful. But to just finish this up is like as a teenager, you go through the normal ups and downs. For me, there were layers and layers of mental health challenges, and it continued through my years, my 1 year at university, and into my kind of early adulthood. And really, it was only I'd say about 2 to 3 years ago that I started to get a grip on all of my mental health because I realized that I'm an adult. And not because I'm an adult because the world labels me an adult. I'm an adult now because I can decide to take responsibility for myself. And many people, they go through life not taking responsibility because they're unconsciously not taking responsibility. Is this my place? Am I able to do something about this? Or am I a victim to the world around me? And most people, they act as though they are victims to the world around them, but it isn't any fault of their own. The way I like to describe it is that if you don't know any better, you don't know any better. And I definitely didn't know any better at the time. Once you do know better, it therefore becomes your responsibility to do something about it. So that's what I started to do. Now, I will layer onto that my kind of career experience. So, um, my time at school was mostly spent daydreaming and dissociating, like I said, but I was smart enough to get good enough grades in school. Um, and so no one really noticed anything until just before university, because my grades just before university weren't very good. But up until then, no one noticed anything. So I couldn't get support from the systems. I couldn't get support from the school. I couldn't get support from here in the UK. We have something called the NHS. Couldn't get support from the NHS. No one really believed me when I thought I had like some kind of condition, some kind of mental health condition. No, I was a lot of like gaslighting as well because I seemed fine because everything was based on grades and what happened in the classroom and what happens. So to be transparent, I haven't been diagnosed with anything, but people around me who understand ADHD think I might have it, and I do too, or something similar, some level of it, ADD something. The reason is because there are different ways that people with ADHD will daydream or will act out. One of them is to daydream. One of them is to be disruptive. Boys are more likely to be disruptive. So people with more masculine energy. That's why boys actually have a much higher rate, school age boys, and I think this goes into adulthood as well, of being diagnosed with ADHD because it's recognizable the symptoms. Whereas people with more feminine energy, so mostly girls, are more likely to daydream, dissociate, and go within. I actually presented in the more feminine way, where if a lesson was 50 minutes long, I could spend half an hour of it daydreaming about something, just living in my own little dissociated world. And that was my life for a long time. But I was smart enough to catch up, and the content wasn't particularly hard or whatever. So I got good enough grades that no one cared and no one noticed. And that pattern basically continued until I didn't, I couldn't put up with it anymore. And that was really when I was 19, 20. My first year of university was coming to an end, and it really wasn't right for me. Everything about the situation was just screaming, this isn't right. This isn't right. Meanwhile, I had been working on a business with a friend of mine. We were on a youth advisory board together um, back in London. And so I went back to London, dropped out of university, started working on that. And that became a youth consulting business. So what we did is we brought young people from challenged backgrounds, from underrepresented backgrounds, from London into some of the biggest companies in the country. Nike, Nando's, AKQA, Sports Direct, Superdry, and we basically ran programs. that and other work I had done around the time, and even since I was a teenager, as I got a bit older, I was always trying to kind of push the boundaries of what I could do because I think I subconsciously got tired of being so sad and depressed and lonely and in so much pain. So it didn't go away right away, but I started doing little things almost unconsciously. Some of that meant I was doing a lot of facilitating, working with other young people, and educating of others, which I didn't know at the time would lead a lot into the kind of career that I have now. Um, and so what happened is I basically dropped out of university to turn that into a business as much as we could, and we worked with some of these epic companies. And then similar to when I dropped out of university, we kind of just went, this isn't really working anymore in terms of how it feels. We weren't enjoying that business. And then COVID rolled around and we were like, oh, this is the nail in the coffin. This really, like, we did some stuff during COVID, right? We worked with Facebook to run some stuff online during COVID. It was all right, but we weren't really enjoying it. My business partner wanted to go into other areas of business, and I did too. I was a part of a couple of different startups, one which was more nonprofit and homelessness focused, which, as you know, listening to this story, was very important to me. It was a personal experience, lived experience of mine, as well as into fashion tech, which was kind of random for me. Learned a lot because it was kind of random. The team wasn't right. We can go into all these things later, but the TLDR is both those businesses I either left early or failed or both. Um, and then went into being what we describe as an operator in the startup ecosystem. So someone who helps other startups, other businesses to succeed. And leveraging that experience as a facilitator, I built, designed, and delivered an award-winning accelerator over the course of a few years, while getting myself trained in what's called NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming, also known as hypnosis, which I use as a coach, but also mainly in those workshops and talks and things that I give to help people work through some of these challenges. I've developed so many other things over time, but that's a highlight of my career, bringing me to where I am now, which is essentially someone who really believes that we all have an inner leader. We all have a voice within. Call it our intuition, call it our soul, call it whatever, works for you and your vibe and your life. Um, we all have something within that is the leader we could be. It is the wisest version of ourselves. It is the us that in 10 years from now knows that it is all going to be okay and knows how, that we can listen to, that we can access now. And there's a gap that we can bridge to achieve reaching that person. We just need to do the right things and get out of our own way a little bit. There are a lot of practical things there, and a lot I've skipped over, but that's the high level. Really, I describe myself as a storyteller who had to go through being slapped down by the universe multiple times, getting back up and going, okay, I'm gonna make something out of this, come hell or high water. And I want to help other people to do the same.
Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing such a transformative journey. I think, like, I, I think there's a better word for it, but I'll use transformative. But can you just tell me, like, it's very interesting how your childhood was like, and then how it changed so much throughout your teenage years and all this. I'm interested to know what is the turning point that made the change, made you woke up, something like that.
Okay,
Because I believe
so
it's not easy as well. Like having
mm,
it's your environment. It's you're part of an environment, and then usually within that environment, it's hard to change that. Yeah.
okay, so there's a few things there. Talking about environments first, I'll work backwards. Do you remember during COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had so much time to themselves. Everyone had so much alone time, and some people could not handle it.
Mm-hmm.
It got very lonely. I'm fairly extroverted as a person. I really like other people's energy. However, what COVID forced a lot of people to do was to go into solitude. Solitude is a word that scares a lot of people. But let me make a distinction for everyone, you, people listening, and even a reminder to myself, because we all need ourselves to remind ourselves of important things, that there's a difference between solitude and loneliness. There's a difference between solitude and being outcast. There's a difference between solitude and social anxiety that I experienced. Solitude is an active, conscious choice to spend time alone. It isn't, I didn't have anything to do today. It isn't the world left me lonely. It isn't it's COVID and I can't go anywhere. It's I am choosing to sit mindfully in solitude. What COVID forced us to do was spend time with ourselves, and then we had two options. We had two responses to that, generally speaking. That's an oversimplification, but generally speaking, we had two options here. You can either sit with yourself consciously and go, can I use this time for something? Or you can do what I did as a young person, as a child, and dissociate and be all in the feels and let it really get to you. And don't get me wrong, I did both. I did a lot of it, really got to me because it did for most of us, and of course it did. It was a generational shift, but it taught me and gave most of us listening the ability to experience some level of what healthy solitude is. That's why I wanted to bring that up, because you said something a minute ago about going through all these things, feeling that space of aloneness. And something I like to say is that every curse is also a gift, and every gift can also be a curse. In other words, everything is a double-edged sword, and therefore there is also always a silver lining, right? So, um, in that way, my experience has allowed me to listen to myself, become very comfortable with myself. I realized like I don't really care about being embarrassed anymore because I don't care about anyone's opinion about me. And that's not always a good thing, by the way, because sometimes you need to be able to be aware of what other people think about you. That became a little bit of a superpower, though, the same way that some people say that neurodiversity is a superpower, right? That ability to be with myself has been a real superpower. Using some of that, I now want to reflect on the turning point you mentioned. So, my first thought when you said that was there wasn't one turning point because it was gradual. And it
Right.
was gradual. However, there is one story that is the closest thing to a light bulb moment that I would like to share with everyone. So, I mentioned when I was young, I spent a lot of time feeling a lot of low moods, a lot of what I would describe as survival emotions. So, I lived a lot of my life in fear, in scarcity, in sadness, depression, anxiety. And there was one day I was 16 years old. I was in sixth form, which is, I don't know if anyone's listening outside of the UK, is just a period of school when you're roughly 16, 17 years old. And we have a common room. We get informed that there's a guest speaker coming to deliver a talk in the school auditorium at 6 p.m.
Mhm.
Um, which is quite abnormal, right? It's not for students, it's for anyone who wants to come. So there's some members of the public who are coming. It wasn't loads and loads of people. The hall wasn't packed out. So nothing seemingly significant. And I was feeling really depressed that day. I didn't want to go. For some reason, I did. Me and my best friend at the time, we were like, I don't know, we got roped into it or something. The world seems to be pulling me to go sit in this talk. A little bit about me when I'm feeling low mood. My vision just kind of shuts off. My awareness of what's going on around me shuts off. I go so deep within that I'm not thinking about what's going on. A bus could come by and hit someone and I wouldn't notice, right? It's
Right.
like that's what happens. I go so deep within, and it's not an uncommon response necessarily. That's just what I'm like. I go very within. I'm very in my own head. I'm very lost in my deep low mood, sad feelings, right? Hashtag sad boy feelings. This is kind of what I was like at the time. And so I was very in that state of mind and somehow stayed around until 6 p.m. I must have been really annoying for my friends to anyone to be around because I was just in this awful mood with this awful energy. Go into this hall, sit down. I'm still lost in my head. So I'm not listening to the talk. The talk starts. It's some old guy with gray hair. I don't know what's going on. I don't really know what he's talking about. And I missed most of the talk. For some reason, one very particular sentence that he said stood out to me. And I don't know why my focus zoomed back in at the time. I don't know why I heard these words, because remember, the entire time I was lost in my own head. I was in my feels, in my sadness. I don't want to be here. Why am I here? For some reason, I snapped back in. And because I wasn't paying attention, I don't know if this was his work, if this was someone else's work. I don't know. All I know is the one line that stood out to me. And he said this one line. He goes, human beings are born asleep, and our goal is to wake up.
Interesting. That's
And
so deep.
I got lost after that on this journey of philosophy and psychology. I was quite philosophical for a young person, despite kind of being in my fields. You know, I despite all my challenges, for some reason, I was always drawn to understanding philosophical concepts, understanding how our brains work, so psychological concepts as well. And I remember the first time I heard the psychological test of, or sorry, the philosophical test of if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Have you heard this before?
No, I never heard
You
that. That's a new
haven't.
thing to
Okay,
me.
this is the most common like philosophical question. It's kind of a meme. It's
Mhm.
like, so I'll ask you the question. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it,
Okay.
does it make a sound?
Wow. Well, it makes a sound, but then no one, because like no one hears it. So who defines the sound,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good answer. So the classic answer to that is if there is no one around, we're assuming not just no people, but also no bugs, no animals, no creatures of any kind. Then no, it doesn't make a sound
Mhm.
because no one is around to perceive it as making a sound. I think I first heard that when I was 14. And my brain, when I heard the answer, I was the kind of person who before that would have gone, of course it makes a sound, that's a stupid question, I don't get it. When I heard the answer, it was like a bunch of puzzle pieces clicked in my brain. You didn't need to describe anything else to me. I just got it. I was like, oh, the reason this makes sense, and this is what fundamentally philosophy became for me, was our perceptions create our reality. Reality isn't this fixed physical thing. Reality is what we are perceiving. So I'm sure you've heard that we only perceive like 1% of the light spectrum, right? I think it's actually less than that. I think it's like 0.00 something percent. It's tiny. How do you know any of the things that you know? And actually, what I realized more recently is that growing up means realizing that no one knows what they're doing. Everyone is making everything up as they go along. The only reason it seems like we know any better because of systems. And similarly, the only reason why it seems like it would definitely make a sound is because we are rationalizing if we were there. If the tree definitely makes a sound, it's because I'm here listening to it. So of course it makes a sound. It's the ability to remove yourself from a situation and think objectively, think as an observer, and go, okay, if the tree falls and there really is no one there, how would I know? And if it isn't part of anyone's perception of reality, it is therefore not part of reality and therefore doesn't exist. When I had that understanding, and understandings like that, this other sentence that we just heard, that I heard about 2 years later, also starts to make sense. All humans are born asleep, and our goal is to wake up. Now, what goal? Who set this goal? I didn't set that goal. His reasoning was that it was our unconscious goal. Our unconscious goal in the back of our heads is to wake up. And I knew in that moment that if reality is what we create, then if our unconscious is trying to wake us up, then everything that we create is a part of this journey towards us waking up. So if I create a challenge, so for example, I have a glass of water here. If I accidentally spill it or accidentally drop the glass, how do I respond? If I've created a challenge for myself and I'm trying to wake up, and I respond by reacting really negatively, by really angrily, I get really frustrated. Am I acting like someone who is conscious, who's aware, who's awake, who's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, look, it's a bit annoying, but I'm just going to sweep it up and move on with my life. Oh, I made a mistake. It's okay. I can forgive myself. Not getting emotionally attached to it. If I can understand that we create our own reality, I can understand that us waking up means us creating a reality that is one of more conscious awakeness. And therefore, us being asleep is us almost being like the NPC, being tunnel visioned. Right? I heard this recently. The idea that some people are just like NPCs is kind of a meme, right? It's like, do you think for yourself? Do you think consciously? Do you actively question? Do you actively reflect on what you've done, what you've contributed, and yourself and your success? Do you have an internal or an external locus of control? So, in other words, do you take responsibility for yourself, or do you blame others as if everything is everyone else's fault? Because the fact is, only you can shape your own destiny, and you are not alive until you know who you are. But you wouldn't bother to answer those questions if you are a victim of everything. When you understand that everything that happens to you and everything you do is trying to wake you up, and you are unconsciously trying to wake yourself up, that begs the question, why are we doing that? Well, therefore, the goal must be to wake up. Okay, so what does it mean to wake up? And that's the question. So, going through all these thoughts, I have this moment of like, what? What's going on? It's almost like it slapped me across the face. That question, that one line slapped me across the face and went, you've got to wake up to this. And it didn't happen instantly. In fact, it probably took 8 years. It probably not quite, maybe 7 years. It was like I said, only 2 or 3 years ago that I started properly taking ownership. Now, during that time, I got myself trained in NLP and started to learn about neurology. I got a book that's up behind me called A New Earth, which is my first kind of spiritually leaning book. I started to look into all these things, but slowly over time, it evolved into what I describe as a puzzle, a really beautiful puzzle, revealing a really beautiful picture. And it is one that is complex nonetheless. It's a puzzle that has taken me many years, and you know what? Might continue to take the rest of my life. At what point is, and the reason why I say was it one, do I have a turning point? And my initial answer was, well, I don't know about that. Because it was lots of things. It's constant little corrections in my direction as opposed to one big turn. Does that make sense? It's like,
Get what you mean.
pilots, they're constantly checking if they're off by zero point 0.1 degree, because if you're going halfway across the planet, you're zero point 0.1 degree off. You could land in a completely different city. So it's these teeny tiny little course corrections that we're making on the journey of life to get to a better place, to get to whatever future we want for ourselves. And I think that's a really important point to end this on before you ask your next question is, everything you've dreamed of, everything that you want, everything you want to achieve, almost all of it, well, all of it that is born from your truest self as opposed to a comparison to someone else, which we can get more into later if you want to. Everything that is coming from your truest self, every dream you have that you want to achieve that is genuinely a deep personal desire to you for the right reasons, is meant for you. You can achieve it, you are meant to achieve it. The question is how. And the how isn't necessarily like following a business plan. How do I create a $10 million business? Well, I just follow this plan to do these things and make this revenue and sell these things, and at this point I sell it for whatever. No, it isn't necessarily a simple linear plan that you can just create and follow. The how are these little constant course corrections, getting closer and closer and closer to the person you really envision yourself being, and that person is the one who can make those dreams come true.
See, really interesting. And I remember you mentioned you dropped out of university with your
Yes.
friend and then started a business from that. Was that one of your course correction?
Yes. At the time, I didn't fully realize it though. So one of the things I find most interesting about this uh course correction towards awakeness that I was just started to describe is that line about the second half of that sentence, that we are unconsciously trying to wake up. Right? If we can accept that we have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind, and that most of our mind exists in the unconscious, unless we're trying to be more conscious. If we can accept that, then we must understand that a lot of the decisions we make, we're making because they seem like coincidences, because they seem reactive. And they might be, but they might be because we need it. So at the time, university, I was very lonely. I struggled to find like my tribe at university and all those things. Um, I really wasn't enjoying it. And I wasn't going, it wasn't the way, you hear stories like a Stephen Bartlett going, I went into one lecture, I knew this wasn't right for me, I dropped out and tried to make a business. Like, no, like it wasn't this active, conscious choice. It was, I feel like shit and I want to take a break from it and see what happens. That was all it was. It wasn't me doing a super conscious course correction. Now I know what that feels like because I've done that this last year, last 2024, right? Um, so that it can be that, but at the time, no. At the time, I just dropped out because something just felt off and I felt terrible. And I was going to university in Glasgow up in Scotland, and I came back down here to London and just decided to do other stuff. Had to get a part-time job while building up that business. The business went okay, but it never made crazy money. And like I said, after a few years, we weren't enjoying it. So um, something had to give. And so none of that was like, I feel conscious and full of energy and I'm making an active course correction. It was, I only realize now upon reflection that it was a course correction. The reason that's important is two things. One, you, someone listening, anyone you know might be going through a time right now where they're making unconsciously decisions. They're making decisions unconsciously, and you're like, why? Why are you making that decision? It doesn't seem great, but it's what they need. Sometimes what we want is not what we need. And at the time, what I wanted was not necessarily what I needed because I wasn't ready for it. I don't think I was ready to build a huge $1 million business at the time. And I don't think I actually don't think I was ready to make the most of university. So I'm not necessarily blaming university either. Not blaming universities either, although I have some challenges with the university system. But I'm not necessarily blaming it. I don't think I was ready for a lot of things. So I needed to course correct and didn't realize it. My intuition, my body, the universe, whatever words you want to use, were influencing unconscious course corrections, and only on reflection do I realize that. So someone might be going through something now that doesn't seem great, but hey, it might be what they need. The second reason that's important is because you and everyone listening, all of us have probably been doing this for a long time, right? For as long as we've been uh, not in our earliest childhood years. So probably from the age of, I don't know, depending on which scientist you listen to, the age of 8 to 14, right? Since we were at least a young teenager, we've been making these unconscious decisions that have been course correcting us towards where we meant to be. Everything that has happened to us up till now was meant to happen, that needed to happen to make us who we are now. There is no, I have this concept I call the timeline B concept, right? So if we're living in timeline A right now, it's very easy to go, what if something happened? So what if I never left LA? I never left Los Angeles, myself, as an example, right? I'd be living in timeline B, where Seven grows up his whole teenage years in America instead. Timeline B is something I can imagine conceptually, but I can't hop back and forth between timeline A and timeline B and see which one I like more. Did I like that one more? Did I not like that one more? Okay, now that I've decided, let me just go back to the inflection point and go, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, no, we can't do that. Timeline B is the timeline you could be living, and it is a reminder that while it's interesting to think about, it could never have been possible because only what you have now is what happened, and what is in the now is the only thing that exists. So if the now is the only thing that exists, timeline B is therefore a trap. Therefore, the words what if are a trap. If the whole of timeline B is a trap, and the whole of timeline B is built upon the saying, the question, what if? What if I did this? What if I didn't do that? What if this happened differently? What if, therefore, is the trap? And this begs the question, why do we ever ask what if? Well, we shouldn't. We ask what if because we're interested in what might have been, but what might have been is not now, and anything that isn't now isn't real. So do you want to be basing your life off of an illusion? oh, what if I did XYZ? That's projecting your mind into an illusion. And so I do not believe that we should be. I have noticed myself firsthand that when we live in illusions, we do things like what I spent a lot of my young years doing, dissociating to make certain things easier. The most exciting life comes from living in the present, in the now, in the adventure that is the everyday, the discovery of what is to come, and building your most beautiful life in timeline A instead. Um, you have to bring me back on this one because I'm not 100% sure what the question was anymore. I've gone on a couple of tangents.
Yes, we're talking about like your drop out of university, starting the business. Was that
Yes, and that's the thing. And actually,
course
yeah. So
correction?
to wrap up that point is like, so that was an unconscious course correction. The second
Hmm.
reason that was it. The second reason why I think it's important to understand that it was an unconscious course correction, and that's okay. It's a good thing
Hmm.
because you've probably made a whole bunch. So I've done this. I was probably doing this time hopping between timeline A and timeline B, realizing that it was pointless. I can then
Hmm.
understand, therefore, everything that has happened to me, even if I didn't like it, was something that needed to happen. So if it needed to happen, then everything that has happened to you, to all of our listeners today, that they don't like about their lives, it doesn't excuse them, right? If someone else did something to you, if you went through a trauma of some kind, if you had some kind of challenge, it doesn't excuse it. It doesn't excuse other people that might have done wrong things. It has allowed you to be and to understand everything you have now, and therefore have all the resources which you already have within you to be everything you could possibly ever want to be. And so you might now be thinking, oh, I'm starting a journey. Right? A lot of young people are starting a journey, but actually, you're not starting. You started when you were born. You started when you turned that, like, let's say 14 years old, just for sake of argument. As soon as you were able to understand something other than yourself, and the narcissistic child mind kind of evolves and grows up a little bit, from that point onwards, everything that happens to you happens for a reason. Everything that happens to you, and I don't mean this necessarily from a spiritual context, although someone can take it like that if they want to. I also just mean a very literal physical context. Everything like cause and consequence. And all the causes that happened led to consequences that were things you experienced, and it shaped you into someone who has those experiences that you can use. And because it's the only thing you can use, it therefore must be what you need to continue onwards, which is a long winded way of saying that everything you want to achieve is not starting now. You've already started. You've already made immense progress. More than you might think, especially if you're like I was a couple of years ago, where it's like I didn't really know anyone, I didn't really have any like social media following, and I still don't really. I didn't really make much money, and I still don't really. Not relatively speaking, And I wanted to. I was like, oh, it's so long. I have to start over again. Because I felt like I started over a bunch of times. I started over when I moved from Los Angeles to London. I started over when I dropped out of university. I started over when I went to my second business and then my third and then changed my career again. But none of it was starting over. All of it was meant to happen to turn into some amalgamation of the person with the experiences that could do whatever it is I need to do at this point in my life. So no matter where you are, I promise you, you're not starting from scratch. And even if that means you make a decision unconsciously, that's okay.
Beautiful. Okay, so you mentioned that, yeah, we're not starting over. We are always like, definitely when we're going into the next thing, we are actually like kind of like bringing the better version of ourselves into doing something like one step higher or something. And I totally agree with that. But can you tell, like, in your all your businesses, you have done so many, and some are failures, some are successes. Can you tell us what are the I think I would love to hear about the journey, and then what are the things you have learned every time you progressed into the next one.
Well, each business is its own little it's its own journey. And they're all little journeys within the bigger journey that is my life, as will be
Mm,
the case for everyone. So I don't know if I have a way of condensing everything I've
mm,
learned from all of them, Except if I had to group the most important, though, it would be that it's all to do with people. Business is a game of people, and that includes the ups and the downs. I'm not just talking about leading people or understanding others so that you can sell to people.
Mhm.
I'm also talking about the ugly sides of people. I'm trying to think about how to say this kindly. Um, we all have ego. We all have a part of ourselves that can be not so kind, can be kind of ugly, that can be very selfish. There are some people that and business people, there's a lot of ego in small business and business leaders. There's a reason someone starts a business, or there's a small number of reasons why people will start businesses, and many of them are egoic. So if I think about the four businesses I've been a part of in the last 6 years, um, three of them didn't work because of people, because of the team.
Mm.
Two of them didn't work because the team collapsed. One of them didn't work because the team wasn't skilled enough. It was only my first business where I was starting with a real brother of mine, a real good friend of mine, and we had a really good personal and working relationship and had learned how to balance that things worked out from a team perspective. That was the only time that worked out. Most of the time things didn't work out because one person's ego was a little bit too big and they therefore sabotaged others or themselves or both or the team. Um, one of my like I'm trying to because I don't like speaking badly about people behind their back, so I'm trying to think of how to give you an example. One of these old businesses, 2022, no, maybe 21 that it all kind of fell apart. Basically, one of the team members was just getting more and more insulting. I think he was getting more restless, more frustrated, and I was the one most upset with the lack of progress. So was putting in a lot of work. I felt like other team members weren't pulling as much weight. Another team member's ego was very caught up. He was very egoically caught up in trying to lead the charge of the business, but wasn't doing any real leading and wasn't executing on certain things. And I wasn't happy with some of the things that he wanted. I didn't think he was being very entrepreneurial. But he sees me as this young guy. He's maybe twice my age. He sees me as this young kid. He's like, "What do you know?" And that just kind of devolved. And I remember the moment I decided to leave that company. It was 3 a.m. and I was reading an email that he had sent, which was just very insulting. And I was like, "No, I'm done. I can't do this anymore." And people's egos get very caught up. My ego was hurt. His ego was super flared up. My ego reacted to his ego, and it just all went downhill. And my my only reflection can be notice yourself, learn to understand this question I kind of dropped earlier. Sorry, my mic just fell. This question I kind of dropped earlier of you are not alive, or a statement, you are not alive until you figure out who you are. It's very hard to build a business until you have at least some semblance of who you are. Because part of understanding who you are is understanding how your ego reacts to other people's ego, how you get triggered, the kind of challenges that you bring to the table, the things you need to improve, right? Your own strengths and weaknesses, how you need to lean into other people's strengths to cover your weaknesses, and the ability to be introspective enough and of high enough integrity and high enough communication skills, so therefore courage as well, to say the things that need to be said so you can manage relationships. If something goes wrong in a business and you can't deliver for a client, how do you deal with that? And the client has to be communicated with whatever you do. So I can give you a very small, high level example of a friend of mine who he was someone else's client. The client did not deliver, very, very disappointed, and the client didn't communicate. The client made a bunch of excuses. The client, like, there was some issues with the money, even though he had been paid. So and it was like, so what happened to the money? I felt like, and it was very strange. And had the person gone, here's the plan, here's what we're doing, here's why it went wrong, here's what I'm going to give you in return, I want to prove myself, that would have been a very different timeline B. Timeline A instead, what happened was lots of excuses, poor communication, lots of ghosting. Humans don't do well with that, right? That's why Uber did so well, because you can see where your cab is going to be. People like being updated. People like knowing. And in the same way, people like, or in a similar way, people like knowing who they're working with. You can't ask that from someone else if you can't give it to them. I mean, you can try, but generally speaking, if you get from the world what you give to the world, right? If you deserve the world to treat you a certain way because you've been treating the world that way or other people that way, then if you want great results, you've got to give good results. That includes how you show up as a person. Yeah, business has really mostly taught me about myself as a person more than anything else.
Interesting. Wow, that's very insightful. Like I never, mm, I like like your final statement. Like running these businesses has taught you more about yourself. But one interesting thing you have mentioned early in your childhood is that you've been through definitely a lot of mental. How would I am trying to find a better way of like saying this as well. Like
Mental health
basically it
challenges.
yes, mental health challenges. That is way better. Yeah. So
What were you gonna say?
you
I want to know now.
I'm not gonna reveal it. So
Okay.
you said you like it's important to understand ourselves first. And I think looking at you now, like going through all this journey, I bet you have like learned a lot about yourself throughout this journey, and part of that is like going through your mental health challenges as well. Can you share how did you went through all of it?
Many people go through these things by going to therapy, is the short answer. Now, I
That's
have
how
a
I did it.
challenge. I have a challenge with therapy. There are some people that go to therapy and they're genuinely useful to learn things about themselves. There are some people that go to therapy and they're there for years and years and years and nothing changes. They don't change how they act, they don't change how they treat others. Sometimes they even make excuses. Oh, it's because X, Y, and Z is really challenging for me. Sorry, my therapist just told me this thing. Like, it's kind of a meme almost, right? Therapy can be used to learn a lot. Everything that is because therapy is you essentially getting the chance to talk guided. You can also, if you don't have a directionality, if you don't have an intentionality, you don't set a strong specific intention, is what I'm saying, then you can just be going in circles. And I didn't want to go anywhere other than forward. And for some of that time, I wasn't concerned with, am I doing this right? I just wanted to get out of feeling like shit. So what I did is I started learning. I started teaching myself stuff. And the second thing I did is I started giving that back to others as much as I could. So to give you an example, the book I mentioned earlier called A New Earth, that was gifted to me by someone. And that was something I reread multiple times that taught me more kind of spiritual concepts about the self, the ego, the nature of consciousness. And I could question, okay, if I'm feeling this certain thing, how do I want to show up? How do I respond? So I could almost therapy for myself. I learned coaching ultimately because I wanted to understand how my brain worked so that I could take myself through processes and routines. Because if my brain is doing an unhealthy habit, such as depression, then my brain can learn to do a healthy habit, such as happiness or joy or lightness or freedom. So, can I give you an example of how this works?
Sure.
One of the first things I learned was every thought in our head is going down what we call a neural pathway. So we have millions of these little nodes in our brain called neurons. And a thought is one neuron firing to another. They all communicate with each other in little pathways. Now, these little pathways are like muscles, where what's the saying? Use it or lose it, right? If you use the muscle gets bigger. If you don't, it atrophies. Because in nature, anything that doesn't get used is considered as not being needed and starts to disappear. That's evolution at play. So in our brains, if like when I was young, there's a constant stream of negative, well, I don't love the word negative anymore, which I can describe more later if you want, but these unhelpful patterns. If there's these really angry or sad or down, low, depressive thoughts, that is one node firing to another over and over and over again. It gets really, really strong. And like the muscle, where it gets stronger, that neural pathway gets bigger and bigger to more effectively fire that, because the brain thinks that it wants to get fired, basically. It wants to fire that neural pathway more and more, because like any muscle, if it's getting used, it must be for a good reason. So if I dropped this cup and it shattered and broke, like I mentioned earlier, to keep using the same example, my brain might want an answer as to why it happened. If the pathway that is used to firing is because I'm an idiot, because I'm a klutz, because I'm not good enough, because I'm a piece of shit who isn't paying attention, that will fire, because generally speaking, nature takes the path of least resistance. So it's going to fire down that because it's used to being used. So the tunnel is bigger, so it's going to take the path of least resistance. And you're going to go, how does dropping a cup have anything to do with you not being good enough, whatever not being good enough means? Well, it doesn't when we think about it logically, but human beings make decisions emotionally and justify them rationally. We justify them logically. We've already made the decision based on an emotion. So I've made the decision based on an emotion that I'm not good enough, and the brain goes, okay, I'm going to keep reinforcing that pathway. I'm going to keep firing down that pathway. And that's what it does. If we take these principles that you use it or you lose it, and that nature will take the path of least resistance, therefore you can atrophy on purpose the unhelpful neural pathways, and you can strengthen on purpose a more helpful one. So why did I drop this glass? If I notice thoughts coming up that are going, because you're a piece of shit, because you're not good enough, because you're a dumbass, I can go, no, I'm not going to listen. The reason is because I wasn't paying enough attention, which is fine. It's totally normal and it's human. I can clean it up, and next time I'm going to pay more attention. I'm going to hold it more tightly. Or it might even be, look, it was a total accident, and there's genuinely nothing I could have done about it, and that is okay, and I'm still good enough. Now, it sounds long, right? It's mainly because I've used a cup example, so it's actually not a great example of a positive neural pathway. But anyway, um, if we actively choose that with consciousness, we're now developing a new neural pathway. So I dropped a glass. Why did I drop the glass? It can either go this way or it can go this way. As an example, it's not a great example, but as a very short demonstration. For those that are only listening, I've basically put my hands in different places and drawn strings between those different places. Those are the nodes and the pathways to the nodes. The brain might still get from A to B, but the pathway it gets there will trigger other nodes that trigger other feelings and thoughts. So this is a long-winded way of saying that once I learned these things, I started to notice my unhelpful thought patterns. I started to notice when I would be negative or unhelpful or hurtful or insulting towards myself. Right? When I was younger, I was very socially anxious, like I said. That meant I experienced a lot of bullying because there's a lot of correlation between that. I learned from bullies to bully myself. And I had to unlearn and learn from my highest self, my wisest self, my most loving self, to treat myself differently. And so therefore I can notice an unhelpful thought, say no, actively think a more helpful thought, and over time, guess what happens? The unhelpful thought pathway atrophies, it disappears because nature isn't using it, and then eventually it's not the path of least resistance anymore. It's a path of greater resistance. So my habit becomes to think more in the positive instead. That was how I helped myself, was I learned how to reprogram my own brain. For some people that won't work. For some people it will work, but you really need someone else's help to do it. For everyone it will work with someone else's help, but some people are not ready to do it for themselves. Call it my temperament, call it whatever, that worked for me. Therapy felt off-putting to me because whenever I did it, I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. I felt like I was doing a lot of talking, but as you can tell, I can talk for days, and I'm more than happy to talk about anything negative or unhappy or unhelpful or challenging that happened in my life, because I've done the reflecting. I've done the self-introspective work to sit with it and go and work through it, basically, right? I've done the mourning for my mother and other people that I've lost. I've done the acceptance of the challenging things and traumatic things I went through as a child. And some people are really triggered by the thought of those things, so they really need a higher level, earlier stage guidance. That's where therapy can be useful. That isn't what I did. I kind of jumped into the deep end and it worked for me. And the reason I say that is because, therefore, it might not work for you or you might not want to. There is a principle in the kind of spaces that I'm in where like your job is to help people with things, right? My job, as far as I'm concerned, is to give knowledge, to give wisdom, to give guidance. There is such a thing as giving someone something they aren't ready for and doing damage to them, right? So I have a few books here next to me because I've been rereading them, but I really highly recommend if you're ready for them. There's someone I gave this one to. It's very thick. It's called, I don't know if it
What's
looks
it?
backwards
Oh,
for you or not, but it's called
no, it's not.
Becoming Supernatural by Joe
Okay.
Dispenza. And he very scientifically explores concepts that, when you look into their history, are actually in things like Hinduism and Buddhism. Um, and he's brought a lot of science to it. He doesn't necessarily use those words, but that's where a lot of the principles come from. And so he's talking about what I would call is more the more authentic and correct version of manifestation, basically, and a number of other spiritual concepts. If I gave that to someone too early, and I did get that to someone recently, a few months ago, and I'm wondering, were they ready for that book? Because actually, if you give someone something they aren't ready for, they could misinterpret it. They could be overwhelmed by it. And so if you're in a place where you're feeling like you're just starting with your journey, my biggest recommendation is dip your toes in to whatever you can complete. So if you can complete a therapy session with someone, dip your toes into that and complete it. And that's what I was doing too. I was just doing as much as I could complete. Again, at the time it was unconscious, but I'm now telling you with my more conscious brain. Dip your toes into whatever you can use to help yourself or allow others to help you that you can actually complete, and then just notice. Just take a step back and go, hmm, what's going on right now? How am I feeling? What thoughts are coming up? What am I doing with what I'm experiencing? How is my body reacting? Our body gives us a lot of signals. Is my body tensing up? Or did I feel really relaxed and calm after that? I wonder why. Someone on my podcast I was recording with yesterday said to me, success leaves clues. So whatever you're doing in your life, and therefore, by the way, sorry, just to finish that thought actually, therefore, everything that is the result leaves clues. So if you're doing the wrong thing, for example, maybe you're in the wrong career, or you're taking the wrong course at university, that will leave clues. Clues in the form of intuitive feelings, in the form of I find it really hard to focus. I'm always procrastinating as opposed to being in a state of flow and interest in this thing I'm doing. So many other things. If you find the clues that what you're doing isn't working, and again, that's feelings in your body, feelings in your gut, thoughts that pop into your head, like I know when I'm doing the wrong work that isn't meant for me when I procrastinate. Because when I do the things that are right for me, I'm just in flow and it can just go and time just passes. And that's success leaving clues. Do the things that you can dip your toe into, explore, and then notice the clues that might be success. Also notice if it isn't quite working and the clues that might be that. And listen intuitively to what happens. And just notice what comes up. And from there you can make those little course corrections if you need to.
I see, I see. I love that. Yeah. I mean, like whatever you said and all that is totally relatable to me. I went through. I started therapy actually by now it's like almost 6 months ago. Yeah, and then like it's pretty much similar things that I learned about, and it's really amazing how you learn that yourself through like
Mm.
exploration and like and feeling and all this, and that is very true. But yeah, hopping into the next thing, just wondering, your childhood hasn't been easy. and definitely you have went through so much introspection and all this. You have learned so much about yourself. But I'm wondering, is there still any parts of your how you live today is influenced heavily by your childhood?
That's a very interesting question. The short answer is yes, because it's impossible to remove that from us, right? We can so thoroughly overcome it. So I'd say two things. One is there's specific ways in which I live that are very influenced still by my childhood, and there's specific goals that I have that I think are influenced now that you're asking the question. This is interesting. Um, Influenced by my want for the future to be a bit different. So right now I still spend a lot of time in solitude, and my time as a child was very lonely. Now I've emotionally see it differently now. The physicality is still that, I only come into London maybe 3 times a week maximum, which means 4 days a week I'm here at my place, right? Where I'm recording this from right now, where I record my podcast. And I don't have it's not what I'd love the most, but right now I'm at a part of my career where it's just my head just has to be down doing the work. Does that make sense? So, and I can be comfortable being alone, but I don't want to be in this much solitude. I'd rather be out and about, adventuring, traveling the world for work, things like that. Um, it's very comfortable and very easy for me to live in this way because my childhood was one where this became the norm. Does that make sense? So that
Yes.
that in that way, I'm still living quite similar-ish to my childhood. It also, though, is interesting to think, well, what do I want most? If I think about my goals and my vision for my life personally, it's kind of the opposite. It's very outdoors, really big family, stuff like that. The exact opposite of what my childhood was like. But therefore is also heavily influenced by my childhood. Does that make sense? It's like it's
Because you did
influenced
not have
by
that, was it?
nature. Say again?
Was it because you did not have that? That's
Exactly.
whole experience is
Exactly.
lacking in your childhood.
Exactly. So by nature of not wanting that, I now have the kind of opposing want that is still it influencing me though, which is interesting to think about because does that mean it will be right for me? Maybe, but maybe not. Um,
Mm.
Doing it intentionally as opposed to reactively would mean designing my life based on what is best for me and those I love, not just instinctively going, I want this because it's the opposite of what I had as a kid. Does that make sense?
I get what
So
you mean,
still
yeah.
having some level of active conscious thinking behind it. Really interesting question. Yeah, it's something for me to think about more.
That is very true. Yeah, like now that you mentioned that, I should really start thinking about a lot of these things and all. Cause like really, sometimes it's just like it's not our body; it's just our experience that leads us to want certain things. But then, do we actually need it? That is very important to think about.
Can I outline something interesting for
Mm,
you? Um, that what you just said really speaks to.
mm.
So I've talked about this a lot on my podcast recently because one of my guests, in fact, it was the episode that went out today. So today, the time of
Okay.
recording, released an episode with a founder friend of mine named Dami. He's the founder of a VC-backed tech startup, seed stage, doing really cool things. And we had a chat that was more about the kind of personal side of building and leading his business and the things he learned. And at one point, we talked about purpose, and he actually asked the question back to me. So I'm hosting it, but he asked the question back to me, which I love. I love having conversation. That's the point. As it's not an interview; it's a conversation. So if anyone's listening and they want to check out my show, that's what you can expect. But anyway, so um, I wasn't really sure how to think about this until he finished his sentence, and I was like, "Oh, this changes everything." And as a result of this conversation, my entire definition of purpose has changed. So he gives me a hypothetical situation. He says to me, "Let's imagine a young boy. This young boy, he goes to a school in a not so nice area, and he does pretty well at school. The school isn't great, but he still gets pretty good grades." And he goes onto the school's sports team and actually does so well on the sports team that he wins them an award, a trophy. And the trophy puts the school on the map. And as a result, the school makes more money. As a result of having more money, it can reinvest it into students and textbooks and things like that. And now the students are doing much better. Okay, so he really served that school, its students, its teachers. Was that his purpose? Okay, well, Demi then goes on to say that's when he was a child, but what about the ages of 20 to 40? What if during those ages he starts a business, he grows really big, he employs a lot of people, his services change his customers' lives for the better, and he sells it and makes a big chunk of money? Was that his purpose? Okay, well, what about the ages of 40 to 60 where he goes on to give back? He has this money, this resource, maybe he donates it to charity, starts a foundation, mentors other young people in business, things like that. Was that his purpose? Okay, well, from the ages of 60 to 80, he retires from work and takes care of his granddaughter. And his granddaughter grows up as a result of all this learning and wisdom from him to do really epic things, build a business of her own, smash through glass ceilings. And at the age of 40, the grandfather has now passed away, and she doesn't even realize how much he's impacted her. Was that his purpose? And now, when I outline this story, most people's immediate reaction is to go, well, surely it's all of the above. Your purpose was all of those things. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, exactly, but if that's the case, our purpose isn't something that can be assigned. I can't write down my purpose is to do X. My purpose is to just be. Now be who? When I was younger and I first started teaching entrepreneurship, I started teaching a model I designed which made it a distinction between vision, mission, and purpose. Mission was more what you're doing and how, the vision was what you want to see at the end, and the purpose was your why. And I've now changed this completely as a result of this one thought experiment. Um, if your purpose is to just be, your purpose is to be the person who is executing on the mission to achieve the vision. So right now, I have a big vision for the way I see the world and how I want to leave the world. And I have my mission for the right now for how I'm going to execute on to achieve that vision. But who am I showing up as? My purpose is to be the most effective, the most loving, the most conscious, the most beautiful person that I can be, most aligned self that I can be, who is most effectively able to execute on that mission in service of that vision. Now, if that's my purpose, to come back to what you just said a minute ago, you kind of go, what are all these things? Are these things right for me? What's the journey I'm going on right now? When you understand your purpose is to just be, almost like all the noise just falls away. It's almost like I can just focus on being the best me I can be. Instead of going, what's my purpose? What's my why? You instead just have, who am I being right now? And is this who I want to fundamentally be or not? And if you're living your life unconsciously, the answer is that it probably isn't who you want to be right now. If you're more consciously developing your strongest, wisest inner leader, if you're most consciously understanding the challenges you have, going through the processes like the one you described, where you go to therapy and you ask these questions, you then get to ask the question. You then get the pieces, the clues of success that you can use, or that success is leaving, that you can use to ask, who am I? Am I being the person that is my purpose to be? So that I can execute on whatever mission I've set right now for whatever vision I envision for the world. And that, of course, begs the question, what is the vision I see for the world, and what is my mission right now? And being okay, by the way, that the mission might change and who you are being will change. Who you are being will change. And if your purpose is to just be, then that's okay. Whereas if your purpose is to be a person who is, I don't know, my old mission in life was to level the playing field for communities that I could support. And that's still very important to me, but it isn't my whole mission for being anymore because I realized it updated. If I had assigned that to myself as my reason for being, now that I'm not doing it, or now that I'm doing it in different ways, or that it's just a small part, I'd be super lost. I'd be like, what am I doing? I don't get it. But if my purpose is to just be, I can just be. I flow with the world and what it needs of me as and when I need it. And so anyway, that's my recommendation to everyone listening is Ask yourself who you are. Until you have that answer, you are not truly alive. And when you've answered it, understand that being that you are to just be. You are a being and your purpose is to be. Therefore, all the challenges you've been through and anything you do quote unquote wrong, right? Any challenges that come up later, they're all okay. As long as you're returning to, is this who I'm meant to be? And give yourself love and kindness as you work through whatever progress you want to make next.
That is beautiful. Okay, thank you. Even myself, I have to think about that now. I need to spend some time sitting in solitude and then like actually like process
Yes,
that myself. It's not an easy
like
question
you
to
said,
answer.
in solitude as well, right? It's something you can get hints from other people, right? You can ask other people, what do you love most about me? What do you find most annoying about me? I don't know, ask your close friends. But no judgment. I just want to know what you think I could improve on. That's a really practical thing you can do. And then in solitude is when the thinking and for those questions needs to take place. One final thing I'd add though, because what you just said is very important, right? Yes, we need to spend time in solitude doing these things. We don't need the final answer right away. I think our generation, especially, is really bad for being impatient about finding such answers. And I'll tell you from experience that sometimes such a radical question and transformation can take half a year, maybe more. I mean, it's a lifetime journey. But if you think we all have seasons of our life, the person I'm becoming now that will inform the next 5 to 10 years of my work, career, impact, etc., has been taking me is now finally getting closer to being complete and is taking me maybe about 5 months. And then the reason I say the next few years is because it will slowly get updated and then quickly get updated when those few years goes by. Maybe I don't know, have a wife and kids by then or something. And then I will need to take some time out to do some radical transformation. So in other words, almost see it this way. This is just me as an example, but this as a principle is 5 months of really intense growth for 5 years of really intense impact and success with smaller levels of growth and then for 5 more months of intense growth. So the growth kind of doesn't flatline, but it decreases during execution period, and the execution lasts a long time. But it means that if you have some serious growing to do, some serious questions to ask yourself, such as some of these, um, it won't happen overnight. It will be a process, and it will take time.
I love that. I totally resonate with the part when you talk about, like impatient. I'm impatient, and then most people are, and then like I think many things that we're using are making us even more impatient, less attention span and all this, and we need to acknowledge that sometimes we have to look at the bigger time frame, bigger picture,
Mm.
and we need to take things slow.
Well, that gets easier as you get older, right? Because you've lived for longer. When you're younger, it's like you haven't lived the time frames to understand just how much that time can be useful. One little thing I would say about time though is I don't believe that time is the answer to everything. I think how much time and what you do with that time are two different things. I know 18-year-olds who have achieved more personally and professionally than people in their 40s because those people in their 40s just tunnel vision through life. So how you use time is far more important than just how much time you've had, which is why it's once you've heard this conversation, it is your responsibility to ask yourself those questions because the time starts now, the clock starts now.
Beautiful. I like that. I like how you presented that. Yeah. But yes, I'm wondering, what's the one thing that you love about yourself?
Oh, I love so much about my there isn't one thing.
Oh,
There's so many things.
okay. I like this. I like this. Usually people struggle to think about it, and then also I
No,
love that
it's not a struggle at
you
all.
know that you have that
But
answer.
the reason is because I know it's usually a struggle. It used to be a challenge for me, and I know it is for most people. And I want people to shift from a place of being resistant and reactive and restless into a place of calm, confidence, and courage, where they're just in this state of consciousness and love. And therefore, you must know your inner beauty. So Do you want me to, can I guess, like go off on a list? How much detail do you want? There's some stuff I want to move on to around like comparison mindset and things that I see. So I don't know. I waffle too much sometimes and I want to get through this quickly. I don't know. How
I
much
think I
detail do you
think
want?
still pick one. You can only get to pick one. You have to choose one.
I only get
Life
to pick
doesn't give you
one.
so life
What?
doesn't give
There's
you
so
so many
many.
choices.
Andrew, there's so many. I can't pick just one. I think what I love most of all
Hmm?
is that I am. Sometimes the answer to the question, who are you,
Hmm.
is that you just are. The understanding that I just am allows me to take deep breaths when I need them, allows me to understand the nature of myself and go through what we call self referral. So, in other words, instead of basing things on objects, so a state of object referral, where you're basing something about yourself on something that happens externally. If I just am, I can base off of my true nature, my true self internally, the being that I am, capital B being, right? Um, Everything that I love about myself when I'm showing up consciously, the love I can give to others, the skills that I have, right? Um, there are a lot of skills I don't have, and I don't mean that in a self-deprecating way. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and I prefer to lean into my strengths than care too much about my weaknesses. And I love that I can recognize that, and this is why I say a list, right? But all these things come underneath the understanding of I understand that I just am. Therefore, I'm present. Therefore, I can notice with awareness what is and what isn't. When it's a storyline of the mind, when it's one of those little lies we tell ourselves, when there's an unhelpful pathway going on, all of that can be noticed because one can live in the present when they understand that they just are. Now, I have much to improve because I often forget about that because we get caught up in the day to day. That's part of being human, and that's part of that journey into waking up, right? That journey of being asleep and waking up. That's what asleepness is, really, is not understanding and being lost in the unconsciousness. The awakeness, I think a big part of the awakeness is understanding that maybe we just are, and that's okay.
Okay, I see. I see. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. That like and definitely making like thank you for answering that question. Even though I made it so hard for you to just choose one specific
Well,
one
I'm
thing
trying,
that
I
that
had
you
to
love
get
for yourself.
fundamental, right? I had to go to
Mm?
the root to answer that. So it's a little bit cheaty, but anyway.
Mm. Yeah. But yes, today definitely you mentioned comparison mindset. Today many
Hmm.
people struggle on that, especially Gen Zs, with all our exposure to social media and all this, where we look at the glamorous things in life, but then not knowing that underneath, like people just share what they want to share, and then not everything. Yes. What do you think of this?
So a few things. I write on Substack. Do you know what Substack is?
Yes, I know.
It's
I know. I used to
basically a
write that as
blogging
well.
platform for anyone listening. Can I read to you something I wrote on Substack at the end of
Sure,
last year?
sure.
So this is I wrote this blog, this kind of article titled "Be
Mm-hmm.
More of What You Are Meant to Be," and I tell a story. So I'm going to tell the story to you now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Imagine this: in the heat of summer, I was sitting in the shade of a beautiful tree in the middle of a dry forest. Over the last few decades, the forest had slowly but lovingly recovered from a wildfire, and it was home to countless life once again. Birds sang in the background, and the noise of civilization was too far away to disturb me. I sat in this amazing place, chatting with a wise man who shared an anecdote with me. Imagine this tree that we're sitting under was an orange tree, he said, motioning to the majestic tree above us. In today's day, it is so easy to see another tree and want to be exactly like it. A great tree like this one, if it produced wonderful oranges, is something that other younger trees would aspire to be. Now, so far, I followed the story. It makes sense that we'd want to aspire to be like something, like someone, assuming this is all a big metaphor, that is great, that's doing great things, that's producing great results. Our role models are getting the results that we want. How inspiring, right? He continued, but what if the younger tree, wanting to produce oranges like this one, grew to produce something else? Let's say apples. All it wanted to was produce oranges. But because that's the model it had, that's the result it wanted. But that's not what it produced. It produced apples instead. It could produce the tastiest, crispiest, healthiest, most refreshing apples in the world. And if its measure for success was a different fruit, it still wouldn't be good enough. Finally, the meaning of this anecdote started to dawn on me. You see, we're not all meant to produce the same fruits. In a world where comparison is so easy, where others' achievements are such an affront to the senses via social media and things like that, it's easy to want the fruits that others have produced, but we aren't all the same tree. If we were, the world wouldn't be so beautiful, would it? It might not even survive at all. If you're meant to be an orange tree, produce the best oranges. If you're meant to be an apple tree, produce the best apples. But why try to produce a fruit that you weren't meant to produce? And at that point, I totally got it. What is the point of comparing yourself to a tree that you were never meant to be? This is how I see comparison today. Comparison mindset is the shorthand that I use for the way our generation, and it's not, I say this without any judgment, I say this totally non-judgmentally. Our generation has very naturally, through gamification and dopaminergic habits that these algorithms have gotten very good at giving us, through our natural tendency to want to compare for the sake of survival in the tribe, we very naturally have started to want to produce the things that others could have. Our real goal in life, though, Andrew, is, or our real search needs to be for, the first biggest goal, maybe therefore, is to understand what our unique talents are and the way that we are most meant to express those unique talents. When you combine that together, you get the value that you can offer to the world. Until you understand your specific expression of your unique talents in ways that are genuinely very valuable to others, you won't produce any fruits. And if you could be producing fruits, but you want the fruits someone else is producing, fruits that were never meant for you, you will only ever be setting a false expectation. So in business, we have a saying, under promise and over deliver. Because if you do the opposite, if you over promise and under deliver, you set the expectation very high and you have given a much worse result. And the gap between, right, it's just what I call the gap. The bigger the gap is in the unhelpful direction, the worse people will feel. Other way around, people feel better. If you set your bar low and you surpass expectations, you feel amazing. Happiness, some people say, is just expectation minus reality.
Yeah.
That's where that famous saying comes from. That's the gap. If you set yourself not even a bar that we're not talking about high bar or low bar. You set yourself a bar in a parallel dimension that was never right for you, you can only ever fail. So, for example, not everyone is meant to be a social media influencer. But maybe we look at someone with 100,000 followers, 500,000 followers, a million followers, and go, I want to be like them. But what if the value you were meant to give to the world was something else? Maybe that's the orange and you're meant to be the apple tree. I know I'm not very good at online content. Now, I still want to impact people through it and grow a following. But what I've realized is I'm better spent supporting people with other types of more direct service, things like this, or things like the workshops that I run, or other services like coaching that I'm designing, or a tool I designed recently to help people. I designed a little AI GPT tool, which I can walk you through later recently. Um, and maybe I meant to do more stuff like that. Use that to make some money so that I can hire other people who are good at social media. That's okay. But if I sat here, which I did for a little while, trying to become a little social media influencer, trying multiple different forms of content, going like, oh, why isn't it going anywhere? And then beating myself up for it, all I'm doing is comparing myself to other trees. But maybe it isn't what I'm meant to be right here, right now. It might not mean never, but it might mean right here, right now. Teddy Roosevelt said comparison is the thief of joy, which I'm sure you've heard before. A lot of people have heard that saying because joy comes from being the tree you were meant to be. Joy comes from, which is what flow state is, by the way. You understand? You're familiar with flow state
Yes,
and
I've
what
heard
that
of it.
is.
Yeah.
So for listeners, just in case, flow state is when you are in a state of just such intense enjoyment and focus in what you're doing that everything else falls away. Right? No procrastination. You feel amazing. You feel high energy, high vibe, high vibration. You get it. You're just doing it. You're super productive and effective. That is that comes from that pathway of try to understand the value that you can give, your unique expression of that value, and if you're actually being valuable when expressing it to others. When you go through that pathway, you effectively execute on that, you start being more of who you are meant to be. And that creates flow, that creates happiness, that creates joy. And if you're doing that, understanding that that's what's meant for you, and therefore you remove comparison, well, if comparison is the thief of joy, you're allowing that joy to flow. Comparison mindset is something that's very natural for us to fall into because our brains are wired to do it. Strength comes from the discipline to switch off the sources that are thieving that joy and focus on answering these questions. Like you said, take some time to be in solitude and answer some tough questions. Some more of those questions that will help therefore avoid comparison are what is your unique value and your unique expression of that unique value. Then you can just go about trying to give it. Just give without expectation in return of whatever it is you produce from that, and then notice if it's valuable or not. And if you see yourself contributing great value through this unique talent, in an expression of the talent that is specific. So, for example, if I know I'm good at helping people overcome certain life challenges, and I know I'm good at the physical manifestation of that might be podcasting, public speaking, or writing, and then I actually do it and people go, "This was great." Right? Those are those three things, what they practically sound like, what they practically look like. Do more of that. So that's what I had to say to myself is like, stop trying to do a million and one things, decrease the number of things drastically that you're doing and hyper focus on the things you're great at that you're meant to be doing. Allow success to come from that. And then if there's more you want to be doing, use the resources that come from success to do it. But yourself, and especially when you're at that younger age, one step at a time, just find your value and give that value first.
See, I see. Yes, that's something that I realized recently as well. Like, I think after oh my God, I think this has to go back quite some time. I think earlier when you talk about exploring yourself, I think I truly explored myself recently as well after I quit my recent job and then started just doing things and then
Mm.
like kind of understood like okay, so this is my value, understood that I can be confident with this value. It it's definitely not a straight road now. It's a squiggly line, something that I learned recently listening to someone else speech. And but yes, I have this
Love it.
value and then I can just slowly work on it, give it to people, and then slowly, hopefully, find a greater value that can, I don't know, exchange it into monetary source of
Mm.
income and all that kind of stuff instead of like just
What have you
looking
learned
at, oh
so
my god, why
far?
is sorry?
What is that value? What have you learned so far? Let's make this really practical. I'm going to use you as an example for our listeners. What have you what has that been? What have you noticed so far?
I would. Oh my god, it's gonna be so technical. I'll talk about I think optimizing business operations through like some using some online tools and all that. Yeah, so that's what I've been realizing because that's what I've been doing myself and all that, and then I realizing that's really been working well.
So you
Yeah.
know what I would describe that as? I would describe that as the expression of the value.
Mm.
What's your unique talent that can be channeled through that unique expression?
What do you can you expand more on that?
So the pathway, the equation basically is
Hmm?
unique talent plus expression of the talent plus tangible value equals resulting value that other people like, right?
Hmm.
This is really, really high level and really basic version of it. So if part one is your unique value, sorry,
Hmm.
your unique talents, and part two is your expression. The expression is the practical thing that you're doing. So your expression might be, I'm going to consult you and help you set up your business operations. That's part two. Part one is what value do I bring? What unique what unique talents do I bring to this expression of the value? So what unique talents are you bringing to helping people? What unique talents of yours do you have that help people optimize their business operations?
Increasing your um streamlining your business operation with a lower cost and then bringing more income to your business.
That's a result. What are your unique
Mm.
talents?
What are my unique talents?
Mhm. Remember earlier when you said to me,
Mm.
what do you love about yourself? And most people
Mm.
find it challenging to answer, right? This is similar. Don't, most people want to be successful, but they haven't set out the outset
Mm.
they haven't just admitted the necessary tools to success. So, for example,
Mm.
if you want to become rich, you have to admit, I'm going to get rich. I have to commit to wanting to be rich,
Mm.
and I have to commit to understanding why I want to be rich. People just
Mm.
want to be rich because they want to be rich. And that doesn't have any emotionality or intentionality to it. And it doesn't have significant intentionality to it. So you decelerate. You might still
Mm.
achieve it, but you decelerate. If you can go, I want to be rich because with X amount of money, I can give back to these causes. I can create this life that I really want. It's going to be this specific thing. So I've set a specific reason behind the goal. You, in a similar way, need to set a specific understanding of a really specific, tangible understanding of your unique talents. What are your unique talents? Therefore, you can accelerate towards the value you're actually going to provide. So, is it that I'm really great at understanding people's problems? Is it that I'm a great listener? I mean, you're a podcast host, so theoretically you should be, and you've been pretty good so far today. So great. So
Thank you.
that's a good sign. Um, your unique talents might be that I'm a great strategist, and as a
Mm.
result, you can tell me about your business, and I can tell you how it can be more effective. Um, and it might be a whole bunch of other things too. But the unique talents that you as a person and a being and a self and a body with experiences and a brain with all your knowledge, you have unique talents and abilities. What are those unique talents?
Yeah, that's again something I have to dive deep into and then
Okay.
figure out. And I love how this unintentionally turned into a business consulting
Coaching
session.
session. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. That's good. Look, that's what I want to do.
Mm.
Right
Mm.
now, I really believe, and the reason why this is so important is because I really
Mm.
believe in the saying, what goes around comes around, right? In karma, essentially, in the understanding that the world gives to us more of what we give to it. That if we're
Mm.
energetic beings, then people respond to our energy. And therefore, we will get more from the world, what we give to the world. So I'm in a state right now where I just want to give. I just want to give as much as I can.
Mm.
So that's why I want to go through this example with you, because if I can just give to you, and as a result, you can more effectively use your unique talents to help people, great.
Mm.
the world's a better place. And I encourage everyone to do that because that might be another way you discover that unique talent. Until you have, you are going to be more slowed down to achieving whatever success you want. Most of us have an idea of what success we want, right? I want
Mm-hmm.
to be rich and have this house and have this family or whatever combination of things it is for us. But we haven't gotten specific about the clarity of details. That's the vision. We haven't asked ourselves why. We haven't set a mission that is us trying to achieve that vision. We haven't asked ourselves what our unique talents are or what our specific expression is of those talents. And so as a result, we have no idea how we're going to achieve the thing. And so instead of it being a vision, it becomes a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of it being a specific goal, it's an illusion. And you just spend your entire life, therefore, dreaming of having the end result instead of giving yourself the tools to make it. So, you have found a way of expressing your you have found a way of expressing your talents, but haven't actually started from what those talents are. There may be a lot more you could be doing. So, absolutely spend some time asking yourself those questions.
Oh, definitely. I'll do that after this chat with you.
Nice,
Yes.
good.
But yes, we have quickly come to the last final question of our podcast, and then definitely thank you for so much insightful information, learnings and all that from you that I even for myself I can apply so much in my life, and definitely a lot of processing I need to do. But I would love to hear what is your recent struggle that you are going through.
Just now I said
Mm,
that there's a difference between a vision and a dream,
mm,
and that a dream can just be an illusion. I realized about the middle of last year that I was working on something very different to what I'm working on now, and I realized that I wasn't in love with what I was doing. I was in love with the vision I had crafted for what that thing would become. And if you're only in love with the vision, you're in love with a delusion. Because without the day to day, it isn't going to be a vision. It's just going to be a picture in your head, a glorified dream that doesn't exist and therefore is delusional. So I had to go back to basics, ask myself some tough questions, do some soul searching, and that started what has now been a 5 month process. And the big challenge that, and I don't know if I have overcome it, has been feeling a bit lost, searching for answers. It's one of the reasons why my podcast is called Lost in Searching.
I was gonna ask you that.
I called it that. I'm not saying that because I called it that. It's the other way around. I
Mm,
called it that because we're all on a journey of discovery in our lives. Our whole life is an evolving journey of discovery. There isn't one end goal. The end goal, life is an infinite game, and any
mm.
infinite game ends when the game ends, and the game of life therefore ends when we die. So, is life a goal? No. Life is a journey. Life is not a destination to be reached. The journey is the destination. That's one of my rules. I have a number of rules for my life, and one of them is the journey is the destination. So treat it like it.
Perfect.
So if all of life is a destination, I've been on this process of going, what's my value? What am I? And applying it, doing the giving, seeing what comes up. A lot of the stuff we've talked about today. And I'm only now getting to the end of that conclusion, but I'm also getting to the end of my financial runway. So I'm doing more and more. I'm now needing to, apply that to things that can make me some money, which is great. That's the place I'm at now, and that's just the next challenge to overcome. When I overcome that, there will be another one after that, and on and on and on.
I see. I see. All right. Okay. Thank you so much on sharing with that. I think that's one of the most important thing about this podcast as well, telling everyone, and like we all have struggles, and then we are
Mm.
going through life in different ways and all that. So
Well,
thank you
one
for
thing I
sharing that.
want to leave you
Mm,
with is, um, I wouldn't use the word struggle. I'd use the word challenge.
I love that. Okay.
Because remember talking about neural pathways earlier, right?
Mm,
One interesting piece of research showed you take the exact same question where someone says, I don't know, it's really a problem the way politics is right now, or
mm,
whatever the subject is. Something is a problem. Exact same sentence, and you switch it out for the word challenge. So politics is a real challenge right now. Exact same sentence, everything else is exactly the same. Just that one word is changed. And you measure people's blood pressure. When they say the sentence with the word problem, their blood pressure rises. When they say the sentence with the word challenge, it stays the same. Because people don't see challenges as fight or flight responses. It's like an adventure. And if all of life is an evolving journey of discovery and is therefore a big adventure, then anything that you might call a struggle, I would encourage you to reframe, is the word we use, as a challenge to be overcome. That gears your body to see it as just part of the journey, and therefore potentially even interesting and exciting, or at the very least, really challenging and you don't like it, but it needs to happen for some reason. You're going to learn something or whatever. Make it more positive. That would be
I love that.
that'd be a last thing to probably leave you with.
That is
There's also,
actually
I
very
think, a
true. And
quote
I
I'd like to leave you with because I'm assuming we're wrapping up now for time. We've been talking for ages. My voice hurts. There's a quote I want to leave you with as well that came to mind when we're talking about
Hmm?
vision that I think summarizes most of the things we've talked about around vision today.
Hmm.
And it's by a man named Arthur Schopenhauer. I forget exactly what he does. He says, most people take the limits of their own vision to be the limits of the world. A few do not join them. And I would encourage all of us to join those who see the world as much more than it ever appears to be right now.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay. I'm gonna highlight that and then make it into a post for this
Nice.
podcast. Yeah. Yes.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Andrew,
All
thank you
right.
so much. This has been great.
Yes, it's been amazing speaking to you and I've learned so much from you. But yes, when if the audience would like to reach out to you, which I believe they definitely will, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
So I would love to send people to a free resource I've recently created, which I very
Okay.
briefly mentioned earlier. I made a diagnostic questionnaire on ChatGPT, which I turned into a GPT for anyone to use.
Okay.
And it goes even more in depth if you have a ChatGPT like Plus account, the one you're paying for. If you're not, it still goes through a simple version where it tests your levels of three different things that I see as being really big challenges for people right now. I mentioned them really briefly earlier: restlessness, reactivity, and resistance. Three unhelpful states that when thinking about them or when that are so common and prevalent in the modern day that I think almost poison us a little bit. They push us a little bit further away from our true selves, our most confident, our most courageous, our most calm and conscious selves. Um, so that's a free link I can give you for people to go sign up to and just use it really easily, which I'd love people to go check out. I also love people to check out my podcast, which is called Lost in Searching, and my Substack, which is called The Search Continues. Everything I have is some theme of journeys, searching, and discovering things. The Search Continues, also just my name at Seven Jacobs on Substack. All the social media stuff too, but those are the things I create as really accessible, high value resources for people because I just want to give as much as possible. So if anyone's learned anything, you can go learn some more stuff. And it's been great to chat, man. I appreciate you.
Yes, beautiful. I'll just put all these links down in the description below so that everyone can access it and check it out. And personally, I'm very interested in the GPT that you have created, and I would love
Nice.
to like go through those things myself as well.
Good. Well, I'll send it
Yes.
to you, man, and definitely make sure you do it. Look, thank you so much. It's been great to chat.
Yes, it's been amazing chatting with you as well. If you enjoyed the podcast, I would really appreciate if you leave us a 5-star review and follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Thanks again for listening to Gen Z Journey. We'll see you again next week. Remember to subscribe to get notified as new episodes come out every Thursday, and please share this podcast to anyone you think would enjoy it. This is Andrew Kwan from Gen Z Journey.